每个理想都有实现的可能。4年来，小银科技以智慧金融助力1800万人逐梦前行。小银科技给理想前行的力量。
本节目由小银科技冠名播出。随着中国经济的快速发展，民间财富迅猛增长。数据显示，截止至2017年底，中国个人持有的可投资资产总体规模达到近200万亿元。目前，中国大陆拥有1000万可投资资产的高净值家庭数量达到了75万户，拥有1亿可投资资产的超高净值家庭数量达到6万户。幸福阶层日渐壮大的同时，全球经济震荡频繁，财富保值增值的重要性尤为凸显，财富管理的需求不断增加。预计到2021年，中国将形成一个规模达110万亿元的高净值财富管理市场。瑞士联合银行集团是欧洲最大的金融控股集团，总部设在瑞士苏黎世，拥有超过150年的历史，在全球51个国家设有办事处，主要业务包括财富管理、投资银行和资产管理服务。在财富管理方面，瑞银是全球领先的财富管理机构。欧洲货币卓越奖将瑞银评选为2018年度世界最佳财富管理银行。面对前景广阔的中国财富管理市场，瑞银将如何进行战略布局？财富管理市场的未来发展趋势又如何？不久前呢，瑞银集团的全球董事会主席魏伯昂做客财新时间，与我们分享了他的看法。
Welcome to our program, Mr. Weber. So UBS is known for wealth management around the world and especially also in China. What are some of the key trends in wealth management around the world? Will future and past competitiveness in this business be different?
Right. It will definitely change. Wealth management business, like every business, is affected by the fourth industrial revolution. And we're here in Beijing today because we're hosting a conference on innovative and disruptive technologies and what it means for banking. So yes, banking in the future will change. But at the same time, technology in banking will not make employees obsolete. So what we're seeing going forward is a better way for our employees to advise wealth and asset management clients by using technology, by using augmented and artificial technology and intelligence to be better advisors. So for us, investing in the development of capabilities that help us is very important to keep a tap on technological development.
Actually, yesterday there is a report coming out of the Hong Kong Wealth Management Association together with KPMG saying in 5 years' time, the wealth management market in Hong Kong will double. Right. Half of it come from mainland China billionaires. How do you position yourself in this environment?
So we're very active here. UBS has a very focused strategy on wealth and asset management being at the core of what we do. And in terms of the growth markets, the Asian Pacific market, the China market, onshore are key growth markets for us. So we're very focused on that. We have doubled our headcount over the last few years in the Chinese market, and we're currently just over 1,100 people, and we aim to further increase our headcount, basically delivering on what we said, doubling our presence in the market. We are working with the authorities, and I saw the People Bank of China, we see the CBRC, and many of the regulators, because we do not just need the licenses. UBS has a broad set of licenses, and on top of that, we need quota allocation so that we can do business in a very good way. So we're investing heavily in the capabilities, we're building the licenses and platforms and businesses we need, and we're applying for the quotas in order to be able to facilitate an increase in the volume of business that we do. What we're trying to do is build that business model both for helping China to develop its financial markets and opening them up, and for international investors to help in China.
Perhaps not just for UBS, a more macro question for the banking sector. So in terms of the wealth management business role in the future of banking business, I was talking to Morgan Stanley people, Goldman Sachs people, and they are saying the wealth management business is actually doing very well. And the retail type of business, which Goldman made a small inroad recently with digital offering, is actually also doing very well. The traditional type of investment banking business seems to be not having the growth in the 1980s or 1980s. So going forward, do you see wealth management becoming a more and more important part for major global banks?
Absolutely, and we have the luxury that we're the #1 player in global wealth management, and we have the aspiration to continue to build that lead over competitors. The experience we have, for us, that the fact that wealth management is a profitable and a worthwhile pursuing business is not new. We know that for many, many years. This is how we specialize the bank, and it's true. The investment banking business has had some headwinds, largely due to the fact that there was a major re-regulation and capital requirements, in particular for more complex trading operations, have increased by a multiple. And therefore, earning the cost of capital in a pure investment banking environment will continue to be difficult because of re-regulation and because of a different macro environment. Today, you have negative interest rates, you have challenges in bond markets because bond yields are very low. And so traditional parts of investment banking business have been challenged either by the macro and interest rate environment or by the post-crisis regulation. And that's why for us at UBS, it's so important we have a diversified business model, that we're a universal bank with the #1 retail bank in Switzerland, but we don't rely on being a retail bank solely. We have built global franchises in wealth and asset management, and overall, more than 50% of our profit comes from those much more stable businesses. And actually, as another afterthought, transaction banking usually grows in line with GDP. Wealth and asset management grows at 2 times GDP because there is a lot more wealthy people emerging, and the distribution of wealth is not as equal as the distribution of income. So being in the wealth business helps you to gain a larger market share and to outgrow competitors that are transaction bank focused. As a wealth manager, you can actually grow 2 times GDP. And in a market like China, where the market itself is growing at double-digit numbers, you can find that this is going to be a great environment. China will be the 2nd largest capital market in a very short period of time. They'll catch up with US capital markets. So helping develop Chinese capital market as an international bank is a key requirement for us, and it's a very good business.
可持续投资是近年来兴起的投资理念。依照传统的投资方法，环境、社会、治理等因素的影响，通常被认为是非财务的外部效应，不会影响投资决策。但是，随着全球生态环境问题和社会问题的日益突出 ，ESG 要素在投资决策中扮演着越发重要的角色。2006年，高盛集团的报告首次提出 ESG 投资理念，这一概念一经提出，便迅速被投资界接受。以可持续性为投资考虑的长期投资策略受到投资机构的重视，但是仍然有投资者质疑，将非财务指标纳入投资决策是否会损害投资回报呢？一边改善环境，一边获取经济回报的可持续投资，是否只是卖概念、卖情怀呢？
Let's shift gear to sustainable investing. You wrote a piece in FT on sustainable investing several months ago, generate a lot of discussions.
Right.
One suspicion is it's hard to doing well while doing good. But you mentioned some study in that piece saying it will actually not harm the returns.
No, so I think the general perception that you have to give up return in order to do something good by investing into sustainable areas, I think is a misconception. The opposite is true. If you invest in companies that are well-led, that are well-governed, that are environmentally friendly and conscious, that have a good governance, those are likely the companies that will avoid problems in the future, that will not be subject to charges and environmental charges, and that are much better long-term viable than other companies who don't. look at and we see that in many companies we deal with. So looking at investments that are sustainable, which increasingly is what many of our millennial clients want to do. They don't just, you could offer them a 20% return in an area that is non-sustainable and they would not invest in it. But if you offer them a return that is good in an area that is sustainable, they will go for it. And very often, banks have not made the step to move from selling assets that are existing to creating assets that can be worthwhile investing. I'll give you one example. We collaborate with the World Bank for the World Bank to open up its issuance of bonds to basically bring in money to private citizens. When you look at a bond that is issued by the World Bank as opposed to US Treasury, it is guaranteed by all governments of the world, and it offers a yield differential relative to US Treasuries. So you get a better return, but you're also sure that you're investing and putting money into a corporation, at this time a development bank, that does good and moves into markets, creates markets, and focuses a lot on sustainability and improving the world and meeting the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations, UN Compact. So it is not impossible to get good returns and to do good, and UBS is one of the banks that I think should be a leader in this area, and we're focusing on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, conceptually this sounds very good. There are a couple of points. Millennials, they are indeed more concerned, but they have the least amount of money to invest. And secondly, if you look from a long-term perspective, these environmental problems or governance issues indeed will have a high probability of coming out. But in a short period of time, if given a specific decision, most company would opt for the lower cost one maybe. You mentioned the World Bank bond, I think which was just issued by UBS, and you have some other efforts in this area. How do you see your clients' real appetite into these products rather than just looking at their conceptions?
Right, so on the first one, it is not true that millennials do not have a lot of money. Actually, if you look at the ultra clients that we have, an increasing number of millennials are the inheritance of wealth created by former generations. So when we look at the dynamics of our ultra client space, millennials are absolutely the dominant group who inherit money from previous generations and need to reinvest them for the future. So the millennial part of what we do. And the other one, I only mentioned millennials as an example. Another one, female investors are much more prone to look at sustainable and societal return in addition to financial return. More than half of the inheritance of global wealth are actually women. The real issue about the millennials is that they often demand a different investment strategy, more balanced in the future. And the second part is also, look, it's not just World Bank was an example. We created the first Swiss clean energy fund, which is a sort of investment into green energy. Our own corporate activities are such that we are already 100% green electricity, renewable electricity. So you can do a lot as a company in your own areas on how you run the company, but you can also do a lot on the investment part. And there are many areas where sustainable investment with societal impact is very important. So I think as a wealth manager, you need to more holistically look at the needs of your clients, and many of those activities are still in the core of investing, yes, so investment processes are key, but many of them have other interests like philanthropy, like art, and we need to help our clients holistically to also invest money in these areas like in philanthropy to really get an impact. And there's a lot of greenwashing going on, so you need better standards, you need to monitor those standards, you need indices to be written on sustainable investments. So we're working with index providers to develop an index for sustainable investment. You probably need derivative markets to come out so you can hedge risk and move in and out of these markets. So banks who understand the plumbing of financial markets can play a big role in developing that particular plumbing in the global financial markets for markets to become more based on sustainability.
在加入瑞银之前，魏伯昂曾在德国波恩大学、法兰克福大学等高校任教，并曾担任德国政府的经济政策顾问。2008年金融危机席卷全球时，魏伯昂领导着德国的中央银行。2011年，他被认为是欧洲央行行长的热门候选人。回首这10年，魏伯昂如何看待政府在金融监管中的角色？金融系统应该如何防范下一次危机的到来？
Two more questions before we move off camera. So you have been moving from academia to policy advisor, and then policy maker, now to the private sector. Do you see over the years that with government becoming more and more dysfunctional or distracted, business or banks need to take a more active role in some of the wider areas in our society?
Yeah, so I firmly believe that governments should set the framework within which competition can evolve. So equal rules and level playing field for everyone, and watch over those rules being kept and obeyed by the various companies. So policy in that sense has a role to play, but I think it's up to market players and to companies to drive innovation. We can benefit from well-established and good education systems, which very often in Europe, for example, are government-sponsored and are in the area of governments. But innovation really is something that has to happen in the market. It happens bottom-up. Companies that are successful become larger and take market share, and some companies that are not so successful will start disappearing. That's the law of the market, and I think that that helps innovation. But we need a level playing field, and therefore the government has a role to play. I wouldn't say governments have become dysfunctional, but since governments had to play a very hands-on role in stabilizing the financial sector in the crisis, governments are now retreating from this hands-on role of managing the banking sector to laying out much clearer and stricter rules for banks in terms of capital, liquidity, and other requirements, so that under these new rules, which are really encouraging stability much more than in the past, the banks can compete and drive stable and reliable business and innovate. So I think both the private sector and the public sector have a role to play. It's for the public sector to set the framework. It's for the private sector to innovate within this framework.
Mm-hmm. These few days marks the 10th anniversary of the global financial crisis. And at the time, you were leading the German central bank. Is there one or two key lessons or takeaways you have from this crisis, either for Europe or for our world?
Well, so first, I already mentioned that since the financial crisis, regulation of capital, liquidity, drawing up resolution and recovery plans has really increased massively. The international community, under the leadership of the G20 and the FSB, and the Basel Committee, have really changed the rules in which banking can occur. And I think banks are now a lot more stable and much more reliable and have much better resolution capabilities. So if we should encounter another crisis, the banking system itself will be much more stable. But that doesn't mean that financial markets as a whole are more stable, because a lot of the regulatory focus has been on the banks, on deposit-taking institutions at the core of the financial systems. Other players have not seen a similar increase in stability, and we have just written a report by the Group of 30 that says, that is all about, are we better prepared for the next financial crisis? And there, one of the recommendations that we make is regulation and stability concerns should go beyond banking and really focus broader into what we call market-based finance, and there needs to be stability in that. Because a lot of what banks used to do, that is credit origination, using leverage, and basically has moved to non-banking entities, which do very similar business models, but don't do it within the perimeter of regulated banks, but do it outside. And I think there should be a level playing field between that is activity-based. So if the same activity happens outside the banking system as in the banking system, it should be regulated in a similar fashion. If we have a non-level playing field, the weaker part of the system, the less regulated one, will be the one that develops new fragilities. And so regulators need to holistically focus on creating a level playing field, also globally, because we're seeing some of the Basel rules being implemented in some jurisdictions differently. So whilst you have the same set of rules created by the global regulators, the national implementation somewhat differs, and that creates new fragilities and non-level playing field issues. And if there's one key lesson I learned from the last crisis is the problems always occur in the weakest segments of the market that are least regulated, and we need to really watch it. It is not enough to, on average, have a better regulated and more stable banking system. The entire financial system needs stability, and we should look now at those pockets where stability has not been fostered in the same way as it has for the core banking system.